shall master this fight. Quiet now your hearts and peace, no tears. Love is the ending of my part, as the light throws down of fear. Tonight you watched in mournful sadness, but when the my spirit will its gladness.
Please be seated. Good morning to you all. My name is Serge Desmarais, and I'm currently the acting provost and vice president academic here at the University of Guelph. And I want to welcome you to the University of Guelph Service of Remembrance. This place, including this very building, is a place of learning, scholarship, and discovery. Visit this hall at different times on different days, and you will find students and instructors engaged in learning together about a wide array of subjects. This is also a place of celebration and ceremony. Just a few weeks ago, convocation ceremonies here saw a new cohort of University of Guelph graduates join a family of alumni who now span generations and the globe. And as the name suggests, this is also a place of remembrance. Built in 1924 through a community movement to remember those who served in the First World War. At the rear of this hall where wreaths will be laid today, are two facing tablets. One bears the name of students, faculty, and staff members who lost their lives in the First World War. The other commemorates those who died in the Second World War. Also in this hall's chapel are two books of remembrance, inscribed with the names of all those who served in the armed forces during these wars. 2014 is the 100th anniversary of the start of the First World War, often referred to as the war to end all wars. Though much of the world has changed since 1914, we all know that conflict and violence are hardly things of the past, or things happening only in a distant place. Unrest, conflict, and violence continue to rack part of the world. Even here in Canada, we were shocked and saddened last month by the death of two members of our military forces here on home turf. Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent near Montreal, then 2 days later, Nathan Cirillo, a reservist guarding, of all places, the National War Memorial in. Here on campus, we lowered our flags to half-mast to mark these tragic events. Last month's events remind us that Canada does not stand apart from upheaval and unrest in other places. Indeed, we must continue to stand on guard for what is right in the world. We're fortunate. We are known as a peaceful and tolerant nation that attracts people looking for new lives, new prospects, and new hope. Here at Guelph, numerous students, faculty, and staff are drawn not only to our well-earned reputation for learning and discovery, but also by those values of peace and tolerance. They know that they will find here a place of caring and community, a place of learning and discovery about ourselves and about each other, about community engagement, about compassion, about good citizenship. I've had the good fortune to work on this campus for nearly 20 years, and during this time, I've experienced firsthand Guelph's strong commitment to research, teaching, and community service. But perhaps most importantly, I've enjoyed other qualities that define us: warmth, the spirit of generosity, volunteerism, and the caring that defines our campus and the larger Guelph community. This is a place that is open to and respectful of differing opinions, shared learning, and discovery. Those values seem particularly important on this day of remembrance. We honor those who gave their lives, both through our act of remembrance today and through our commitment every day to make a better place of the world that has passed from their hands to ours. Before we begin our ceremony, and out of respect to each of you who have taken the time out of your busy schedules to join us today, could I ask you to please take a moment to silence your cell phones for the duration of the service, and I thank you. I would now like to invite Ann Wilson, Acting Associate Vice President Academic, to the podium.
Dulce et decorum est is a poem by Wilfred Owen, who was killed in action on the 4th of November, 1918. Owen takes his title from the Roman poet Horace, who in Ode number 3 wrote, Dulce et decorum est pro patria more. How sweet and honorable it is to die for one's country. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through the sludge, till on the stairs we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams, you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friends, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie. Dulce et decorum est, pro patria more. I now invite Ryan Brejak to lead us in a responsive reading.
We welcome you to follow along to the responsive reading on the screen above and respond with the words, "We will remember them when prompted." They went with song to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Please respond with, "We will hold the torch up high." Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
We speak here of challenge, of democracies, of war and peace, violence and nonviolence, racism and human dignity, oppression and repression, and liberty and human rights, poverty and freedom from want. This must be a world of democracy, a world freed from the horrors of poverty, hunger, deprivation, and ignorance, relieved of the threat and the scourge of civil wars and the external aggression, and unburdened of the great tragedy of millions forced to become refugees. Let the efforts of us all prove that Martin Luther King Jr. was not a mere demeanor when he spoke of the beauty of genuine of brotherhood and peace being more precious than diamonds, silver, and gold.
During the next song, the procession will collect the Rose Bowl and wreaths and proceed to the chapel in the back of the hall to lay them. The history of the Rose Bowl is written on the program you received when you arrived today. It was donated in memory of Royal Air Force Captain John Playford Hales, an OAC faculty member killed in France in 1918. The Rose Bowl will be carried to the John Playford Hales' nephew, David Hales. The student wreath is carried by a representative from the Graduate Student Association, Katie Clow, and from the Central Student Association, Colin Morris. The faculty and staff wreath is carried by Dr. Ann Wilson and Ryan Bridjak, and the alumni wreath is carried by alumni Heather Robinson and Brendan Gorman. The fourth wreath will be carried by Steve Nessner on behalf of the Royal Canadian Legion of Guelph. Please stand during the laying of the wreath.
Poppies blow between the crosses, roll on, that mark of place. Still bravely singing, Lord, scarcer amid the guns we are the dead, short days ago we lived, felt tossed the sunset glow. Loved and were loved, and now we lie in flatter's peace. Take up a quarrel with us, take up a quarrel with the foe. To you from fairy hands we throw the torch. We must to holy ground, we must to holy ground. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders. Wondrous fields of poppies grow between the crosses, roll on, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks still bravely singing loud. Scarcer amid the gods
Please be seated. Let me now invite to the lectern Ifti Sheikh and Jamie Vanderberg from the multi-faith team here on campus.
This is a poem by Federico Mayer, a Spanish scientist, scholar, diplomat, and a poet. He says, "We will plant olive trees where before there were thorns. All of us the same, each one of us different. We'll walk hand in hand with the new song of love on our lips. We will plant olive trees where before there were thorns. Sharing is the one urgent need in this dawning of a new century. Paz, peace, pace, mir, shalom, salam. We will plant olive trees where before there were thorns. Thank you.
This morning, my remarks will be interrupted by the 11th hour, and we will take a moment to listen to the last post and mark the moment with silence. But before then, in 1936, almost 80 years ago now, O.J. Stevenson wrote a poem entitled "The Light of Remembrance." Dr. O.J. Stevenson was head of the OAC English department from 1916 to 1939. Several generations of Ontario students remember O.J. Stevenson as the author of public school readers and high school interpretations of Shakespeare. But for OAC students, he opened up the world of art, theater, poetry, and music. His colleagues called him the best English teacher in the province, and his students found him inspirational and his teaching transformational. Today, as we read excerpts of O.J. Stevenson's poem, The Light of Remembrance, we need to acknowledge that this poem was written by a teacher who loved his teaching and his students, and he was devastated to see so many lose their lives. His poem is very much a local response to what was a global crisis. It begins, "For these, the light of life went out before the candle was well lit. For them, the flame of life went out in the murky, stifling dugouts, in hospitals at dawn, in no man's land, and in the fields of air while cloudless sunlight shone. Their light went out." On this Remembrance Day, we recognize all of those who lost their lives in situations of conflict, including those who lived to tell about it. We recognize the soldiers who fought 100 years ago in World War I. We recognize those whose light was extinguished in World War II. We honor those who have struggled to maintain peace in the wars of our more recent past. Today, we remember. But what does it mean for us to remember? To really remember the past? To dig up what was buried so long ago? O.J. Stevenson's poem brings the act of remembering close to home. He paints a picture in the rest of the poem of what continues to unfold on the athletic fields on this campus, and imagines all those who died in battle to be watching the scene. He writes, "On a mellow autumn afternoon, on yonder playing field, the young athletes speed to the racer's goal mid cheering throngs, and flag and pennon flutter. And young girls lend charm and color to the vibrant scene. And at the well-loved sound, sunk eyes peer forth again from these dim casements to behold the scenes in which of old they once shared. And ghostly figures mingle with the throngs, But when the last shout dies away and the dim night comes on, they vanish in the gloom. Put out the light? Nay, nay, while memory holds the light, their light will burn with deathless flame. At the heart of Remembrance Day is the act of remembering. As long as memory holds, their light will burn with deathless flame. Remembering is not just a simple or empty act. It's not just an hour carved out on November 11th. It's not just a meaningless ritual. Remembering is far more than that. It's a source of wisdom, an act of resistance, and a step toward peace. Let's start with wisdom. This summer, I reached out and grabbed a 6-foot tree that was growing on the edge of the tree line in the Northwest Territories. I grabbed it a foot or so from the top and I gave it a pull, expecting it to bend over like every other tree I had ever grabbed. This coniferous tree, though, didn't bend at all, and neither did the one next to it. Both had a strength that I had not experienced before. Earlier in the day, I had been talking to Tony, an elder in his First Nations community near Great Slave Lake. Together, we had talked about the trees. They were hundreds of years old. And we talked about wisdom. He told me about the spirituality, noting that the North is considered the place of wisdom. He said it's not just a place of hardship and suffering. It's a place in which hardship and suffering give birth to untold strength. The trees reflected this reality. It's as if they all had stories to tell. The trees looked tortured. Their bark was wrinkled and their branches weathered. They had survived hundreds of harsh winters and been battered by the strongest of gales. And yet there was nothing fragile about these stunted 6-foot trees. In fact, they carried a strength that I had never experienced before. Hardship and suffering had given birth to untold strength. And that is why Tony and so many others call the North the place of wisdom. We remember the past so that the hardship and suffering experienced on battlefields around this world might give birth to a new kind of strength. Remembering is a way of bringing the past to bear on our present reality and to take the lessons from the past and apply them to today. Remembering is a source of wisdom. There's more to be said, but it's 11 a.m. Let's take a moment together with people across the country and remember. Let's stand together while Ryan Sullivan plays the last post and we observe a minute of silence. Staff, students, and faculty, remembering is not just a source of wisdom, it's an act of resistance. We live in a world ripe with violence and full of human rights still today. There's intolerance and injustice all over the place. Miroslav Volf, who lived through the conflict years in the former Yugoslavia, has also noted that we live in an age of forgetfulness, an age in which we are tempted by the newest technology, in which we hardly remember the lovely tones of the rotary phone, an age in which we are numbed not so much by the information that we receive and the news we hear, but by the sheer volume of it. We are desperate to forget. But in an age of forgetfulness, remembering is an important ongoing act of resistance. When we look back and remember the horrors of the trenches, when we look back and remember the effect of the gas, when we look back and remember the lives that were lost, the lights that were extinguished, it's our way of saying no more and not again. It's our way of joining those whose lights were extinguished. And more than a source of wisdom and an act of resistance, remembering is also a step toward peace. To truly remember on this day is not just to look back and understand the horrors of war, but to tell the stories of those soldiers who fell madly in love, head over heels, even in the midst of conflict. To truly remember is to tell those stories of miraculous friendship that developed between guards and prisoners of war. To truly remember is to tell the hard-to-believe stories of forgiveness, those really great stories, the ones that really mattered, those stories of forgiveness that take place even in the wake of genocide. To truly remember is to hold on to the good that is present in this world and in the others that live here. On this Remembrance Day, we remember those whose light went out. We take the lessons of the past and apply them to today, transforming them into wisdom. We cry out no more and not again, and we take small steps towards peace. Today, we remember.
So we want to thank you for making time today to join us and remember those that have served our country. As time passes, we must remember that it is because of their sacrifices that we enjoyed the freedom we have today. Today's event will end with one final song from the choir. Then there'll be a formal procession out of the hall. Please note that you are welcome to remain in the hall and reflect. And you can leave as you are ready. But as you leave, we will be distributing poppy seeds for you to plant in the spring so that next year, the city of Guelph will be a sea of poppies. These seeds are part of the 2015 community campaign to recognize the 100th anniversary of In Flanders Field, written by Colonel John McRae of Guelph during his time at a field hospital outside of Ypres in France. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today and for taking this moment of time to come together and share in this moment of remembrance. Thank you.
glory that